السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 159. Specifically addresses those who conceal the truth after that truth has been delivered and made clear through the revelations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who deliberately conceal the truth, their result will be أُولَٰئِكَ يَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَلْعَنُهُمُ اللاعنون. God's curse shall be upon those people. Number one, who is this verse referring to specifically? Who are the ones that conceal the truth? According to the commentaries, they state that the ones who are specifically referred to in these verses are the scholars who lived in Medina at the time of the Prophet, the Jewish and Christian scholars, who in their books, in their scriptures, had been revealed that at a certain time, Khatamul Anbiya, the seal of the prophets, the final prophets, shall reappear in the city of Yathrib, later to be known as Al-Madinah. And this final prophet shall have certain attributes. For example, one of his attributes is that the seal of prophethood is behind his neck, behind the shoulders. Another sign of prophethood is that he does not consume the sadaqah, the charity. Anything which is offered as charity, he does not take for himself, among other attributes. And these attributes were revealed in the original scriptures which were revealed to the prophets. These are what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to as, specifically as al-bayinat wal-huda, the signs of guidance. Thus, the final prophet is a prophet of guidance. And in order to complete the revelation of the messengers who came before, one must accept that there is no God but Allah, and that all the messengers are the messengers of Allah, and that Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that this prophet would be the final messenger. Now, there were people who lived deliberately. They chose Al-Madinah as their abode, as where they would live, so that they would be honored by the seal of the prophets who they knew would arrive at a certain time. Not only that, there were people who came from all corners of the empire at that time searching for this prophet. One of those people who had the honor of finally finding the prophet and accepting Islam and becoming one of the closest followers and companions of the prophet is Salman al-Farisi, a man who came from Bilad al-Faris, Persia at the time, deliberately seeking a man who had the following attributes. And when he found him, he accepted Islam and he became one of the closest, if not the closest companion to the Prophet. So much so that the Prophet says about him, Salmanun minna Ahlul Bayt. That Salman is one of us. He is counted as one of us, Ahlul Bayt. There is an even more surprising hadith, which just goes to show you the merits of Salman. The hadith is mentioned in Sahih al-Kafi, narrated from our fourth Imam, Al-Imam Zain al-Abidin. He says the following. He says that if Abu Dhar, another very great companion, honorable companion, knew what was in the heart of Salman, he would have killed him for it out of jealousy. How much love that Salman, how close that he was to Ahlul Bayt, he would have murdered him for it. So there were people who searched for these attributes and they found these attributes. Allah says that the ones who recognize these attributes as revelation and they deliberately conceal them, they conceal the truth, God shall curse those people. أُولَٰئِكَ يَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّاعِنُونَ. Now this is a specific address, meaning that God is specifically addressing those who concealed that truth which was revealed to them. However, there is a more general aspect to this verse. And the more general aspect is that anyone who conceals a certain truth deserves the curse. And what does curse mean? La'an. La'an, we've taken it as a taboo meaning. But the word la'an, when used in the context of the Quran and in the hadith, when we invoke the curse of Allah on a person, we are not invoking that Allah necessarily punish that person. What it means is that God take His mercy away from that person. And not for who that person is, not out of personal hatred or vendetta, but rather out of that person's actions. So in a way, when you invoke the curse of Allah on a person, you are distancing yourself away from that person's deeds or that person's actions. There's a general address in this verse. Anyone who conceals the truth, anyone who hides something which needs to be said, for whatever reason, invokes the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon himself. Because there's an important issue here, and there's an important question, and that is, when it comes to concealing the truth, is concealing the truth equated to lying? That's a question that many people have. Concealing the truth, when you know something and you hide it back, is that equal to lying, deliberately, intentionally lying to a person? Now, the human being has created many loopholes for himself, right? And today, there are many things which fall under the category of lying. They fall under the deception, the category of deception, but we like to refer to them as, for instance, white lies, right? A white lie is considered minor. It's considered harmless, and sometimes even considered beneficial. I was reading the statistics today on lying, and it said that 12% of people admit to lying often, on a regular basis. 32% of people admit to lying on their resumes. Of course, when you're trying to secure a job, it's more important than when you're in a regular conversation. And 80% of women admitted to saying harmless white lies or stretching the truth. Now, I think men also do this as well. I don't know why the statistics were singling out women, but this reveals a nature of the human being that if we believe that holding back the truth or deceiving someone is harmless, then we think it's okay. But the number one question is, who and what decides whether a lie is harmless or not? When you say a lie, who decides whether it is harmless? We don't often recognize the extent of our words. Sometimes you may say something hurtful to somebody and that person does not reveal that they are hurt. Does that mean that saying that thing, if it is profanity, for instance, or if it is slander, does that make it okay just because the person does not reveal that they are hurt? The same goes for lying. Just because you held something back, just because you did a white lie, or just because you stretched the truth and you harmed a person, you negatively affected a person, does that mean that it in itself is harmless? It doesn't necessarily mean that. So, for this reason, we can see that concealing the truth can be equated to lying, because in many cases, concealing the truth is lying in itself. The only difference is that the human being who chooses to conceal the truth sometimes, to not divulge certain information, sees it as harmless. and thus it becomes okay. But it's not always okay. This is one problem. Another problem is that concealing the truth, although we do not usually equate it with lying, however, it is a gateway sin. Just like you have gateway drugs today. A gateway drug is a drug which may not be harmful in itself. However, it opens the gate for more recreational drug use. One day the person is, for instance, taking marijuana, and then in a few years down the road he is on cocaine and heroin and so on and so forth. These are gateway drugs. They open the door, they open the possibility for more damage to be inflicted. Likewise, concealing the truth is a gateway sin. And the Quran refers to this. It refers to gateway sins. Things which we may think are not significant, but in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala they are great. Notice, for instance, in Surah An-Nur, the first verses of Surah An-Nur, chapter number 24, speak of the event which in the Quran is mentioned as Al-Ifk. Now what happened, according to commentators, this event was associated with one of the wives of the Prophet. Now some commentators say that these verses were revealed in favor of Aisha. Other commentators say that these verses were revealed in favor of Maria al-Qibtiyya, one of the other wives of the Prophet. Now what happened was that people began to slander some of the wives of the Prophet. Some say it was Aisha, some say it was Maria. And how did this slander take place? The way most slander takes place today. Word of mouth, rumors. A rumor begins with one person or it begins with two people, and all of a sudden this rumor, which is not true in itself, becomes an accepted fact in a community or in a society. It takes one person. One person who knows the art, and mashallah, there are people who are experts in the art of just creating a rumor. A person who spreads a lie is not responsible for spreading it, just knows how to create the perfect lie. To initially create the perfect slander and introduce it to the right people. And people are susceptible to rumors. It's exciting to hear a rumor and pass it on to someone else. So it began with a few people. They began spreading rumors, slandering one of the wives of the Prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemns those people in the Quran. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِّنْكُمْ, that those who began with these rumors, with the slanders, are a small group. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemns these people. In the end, He says, وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. That you see it to be something which is very simple. Hayyin. Hayyin means something which is valueless, something which is simple. وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. In the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is something which is very great. Especially when it comes to slandering the reputation of people. Slandering, trying to destroy the reputation of a believing man or a believing woman. And in the rest of Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about what is the punishment of those who try to destroy the reputation of a believing man or a believing woman just through slander and just through rumors. That a person who accuses a believing man and a believing woman of, God forbid, a crime such as adultery, a person who introduces this slander, who introduces this rumor or this accusation and does not have hard, solid evidence to back his claims, that person shall be punished. Islamic law says that that person is punished. If you want to prove that a person has committed fornication or adultery, how many witnesses do you need? 4 witnesses. 4 just witnesses who see the action take place with their own 2 eyes. So how hard is this? To find 4 just witnesses to see the act taking place with their own eyes? Jurisprudence tells us that if 3 people show up and the 4th does not show up, what happens? Those 3 are punished. And if 2 people show up and 2 others do not show up, those 2 are punished. And if 1 person shows up by himself and 3 others do not show up, that person is punished. Even if 3 show up and 1 does not show up. Meaning that if you are going to spread a rumor or an accusation, you better have hard evidence. وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. You see it as something which is simple, just initiating a rumor and spreading it within a community. In the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is very great. So when it comes to white lies, when it comes to holding back information, important information, which we think, in our eyes, we think it is something which is harmless. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says these things which you think are harmless in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are very great. And in many cases, concealing the truth is just as bad as lying to a person. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Why? Why is something so small considered so great in the eyes of Allah? Some people, they speak of the great sins. Al-dhunub al-kubra, or al-kaba'ir, they refer to them. Such as what? Gambling, or adultery, or consuming alcohol. They refer to these as the great sins. Now when you're saying great sins, you are implying that there are great sins and minor sins. Some scholars have said that you cannot say great sins because every single sin is great. There is no sin which is minor. Because when a person sins, he is in essence revealing an attitude or a behavior which exists in himself, and this behavior exhibits its rebellion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that a person has the nerve to disobey the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to some scholars, is enough to merit him punishment. I'll give you an example. If a person has a glass or a bottle of water in front of him, and he opens the bottle and he begins to consume with the intention that it is alcohol. He thinks it is alcohol. And his intention is to drink alcohol. He wants to get drunk. He wants to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He drinks it and he realizes that it is water. Does this person deserve punishment or not? This is a controversial question. In the end, he didn't drink alcohol, he drank water. How can God hold him responsible for this? This is where the scholars have disputed among themselves. They said that it's not the actual sin which deserves the punishment. It is what they refer to as tajarri, jur'ah, having the nerve to disobey the commands of Allah. That in itself merits a person punishment. Some scholars have said no, because this crosses the boundaries of the mercy of Allah. Allah is more merciful. It is correct, Allah is merciful. However, we must not have that attitude of rebellion, having jur'ah. And this all comes from the smallest sins. See, the smallest act of disobedience done intentionally, done without asking Allah for forgiveness later, reveals a greater attitude. That this person does not respect the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus it merits him punishment. And thus when it comes to these sins, these small sins which we think are small, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they are very great. وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. Concealing the truth, although it is not lying, however, in some cases concealing the truth, we may think of it to be harmless. Thus, it becomes something which is very easy. Thus, normal lies, we justify them as white lies. Lies, we begin calling them half-truths, right? A half-truth is what? Something that, a statement which has some truth and has some deception. However, in reality, a half-truth does not exist. As long as it has just a little bit of falsehood, even 1%, then that's it. It's destroyed. It's like a person who has a terminal illness. It's only 1% in his body. This person is still ill. This person has the sickness. Whether it is 1% or whether it has taken his entire body. This lie, this falsehood in an entire statement, whether it is 1% or whether it is 50%, does not make it a half-truth or a 3/4 truth or a 1/4 truth. It is deception. However, we justify it for whatever reason that we want to justify. And we should not install in ourselves an attitude, a behavior of rebelling against the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For in the same way that God may reward us for having an attitude of gaining proximity, sometimes you want to do something good, you have that intention, you have the attitude. However, God does not facilitate the means for you to do good. He does not give you the success, the tawfiq. You say that if I was a millionaire, if I was a billionaire, I would build hospitals and I would build orphanages, although we don't know how many people are truthful in this regard. But if you truly have that intention, and God knows the intention, God knows exactly what is in your hearts. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَأَنَّهُ إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. Know that God comes between a man and his heart, that God recognizes the intentions of men, and that He comes between a man and his heart, and that you will be resurrected to Him. God knows what is in our hearts. In the same way that He can reward us for having good intentions, scholars have said that He can punish us for having evil intentions. And this, of course, is a dispute among scholars. All of this goes back to this point, is that when it comes to concealing the truth, what we consider something which is very minor, sometimes in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is something which is very great. From a religious perspective, we say the following. Number one, we have a hadith, verses in the Quran, and also a hadith from the Prophet and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, which condemn the people who conceal the truth. One hadith says, from the Prophet, he says, من سئل عن علم يعلمه فكتم ألجم يوم القيامة بلجام من نار. He who is asked about a truth, to divulge information, something which he knows about, but he hides it back. فكتم. Katam comes from kitman. إن الذين يكتمون. Those who conceal the truths. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place on him a lijam, a bridle, the headpiece which is placed on a horse, by a rider. You have the saddle and the headpiece. The saddle, the rider rides on it, and the headpiece is to control it, to steer it left, right, stop, go. One which will be created out of fire will be wrapped around his head on the Day of Judgment. This is one hadith. Another hadith is narrated from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He was asked one day, من شر خلق الله بعد إبليس وفرعون. Who is the worst creation of Allah after Iblis, the shaitan, and Pharaoh? قال العلماء إذا فسدوا. The scholars, once they become deviated and corrupt. هم المظهرون للأباطيل. They are the ones who introduce that which is void, باطل. الكاتمون للحقائق. Those who hide that which is true. وَفِيهِمْ قَالَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُمُونَ مَا أَنزَلْنَا. And it is for these people, these scholars mean, ulama does not only refer to scholars. Ulama refers to anyone who knows something and hides it back. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, it is for these people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verse, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُمُونَ مَا أَنزَلْنَا. That those who conceal the truths which we have revealed and made as a clear guide for people, then Allah will curse them on the Day of Judgment, and everyone who was affected negatively by them, وَيَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّاعِنُونَ. Those who were affected by them shall also curse them on the Day of Judgment. We have, the Quran tells us that if a scholar leads a person astray intentionally, and intentionally can mean many things. If a scholar has not done enough research on a certain subject and presents his own opinion, his own fatwa, this, although he believes he has done enough research, although he has his own conviction, but that is just as bad as the scholar giving falsehood, when he does not do enough research and provides his own opinion, or anyone who provides his own opinion in order to lead people astray. وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّا أَطَعْنَا سَادَتَنَا وَكُبَرَاءَنَا فَأَضَلُّونَ السَّبِيلَ. Surah Al-Ahzab says that on the Day of Judgment there will be people who will stand in front of Allah and say, our Lord, we followed our sada, our not Sayyid. Sayyid meaning leader. We followed our leaders and our elders, وَكُبَرَاءَنَا فَأَضَلُّونَ السَّبِيلَ. They are the ones who led us astray. رَبَّنَا آتِهِمْ ضَعْفَيْنِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ وَالْعَنْهُمْ لَعْنًا كَبِيرًا. Oh Allah, double their punishment or multiply their punishment. One for sinning and one for leading us astray. And do not grant them your mercy. This is a very important topic. It does not only concern scholars or people of knowledge. It concerns us on an everyday basis. Because I believe, practically speaking, we have all found ourselves in the past, or maybe this happens more often to some people than others, in a situation where we hold back the truth. Where someone is speaking, says something wrong, does something wrong, and you don't correct that person. For many reasons. One reason is that person may be your friend. That person may be your business partner. You don't want to lose the benefits of that person. So what do? You stay quiet when it comes to evil. If you want to know who your true friend is, according to the hadith says, صَدِيقُكَ مَنْ صَدَقَكَ لَا مَنْ صَدَّقَكَ. Your friend, your sadiq, is the one who gives you the brutal, honest truth. Not the one who accepts and believes everything that you say. If there's a person who everything that you say accepts and says, yes, you're right, you're always right, this person is not your true friend. Your true friend is the one that tells you, no, you said this wrong, and I'm going to criticize you. And I criticize you because I'm looking for your benefit. Sadiquka, memorize this. Your friend, Sadiquka man sadaqak, la man saddaqak. The one who is willing to tell you the truth, not the one who is quiet and allows you to do wrong. The one who is quiet and allows you to do wrong, this person does not have your benefits in mind. They have their own personal benefits, either for your friendship or for your business or anything. Sometimes we seek the pleasure of other people. We seek the pleasure of family and friends and co-workers. And I'm told this happens a lot, especially in the professional field, that you have to put up with a lot of lies and a lot of deception. Many people, they complain about this, that we have to put up with so much. Why? Just so we can secure our job positions. Many people complain, for instance, from their bosses or their co-workers, that we have to put up with their lies and we have to put up with, all the trouble that they give. Why? In order to secure our position. We should not be afraid when a person does wrong to tell that person that you have done wrong, especially if that person is dear to your heart. It is your responsibility to turn to those who are closest to you. And if you see them doing wrong, you don't have any ta'aruf or you don't have any mujamala. No, you tell this person you're doing wrong. And this was the attitude of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. One day it is said that Al-Walid ibn Uqba, who was the cousin of the third Khalifa, Uthman ibn Affan, who Uthman had appointed as the governor of Kufa. One day this man, imagine, he is the representative of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He shows up to the morning prayer, and one of the duties of the Amir, of the governor of every city at that time, was to lead the Jama'ah prayer in congregation. It is said that he showed up to the morning prayer drunk. He was completely drunk. And they came to him, he stood in front of them, and he prayed Salatul Subuh. How many rak'ah? How many units? 2. He prayed them 6. And when he began Allahu Akbar. Instead of reciting the Quran, he began to recite poetry for his mistress. Yes? And then at the end, he turned to them and he said, I have prayed 6 rak'ah and I still have the strength to pray more if you want. And then he began to vomit inside the masjid and he passed out. And this was in Ramadan. This is during the time of not 300, 400 years after Rasulullah. This is less than 3 decades after Rasulullah. Imagine. And the punishment for a person who got drunk during Ramadan was more than that person who got drunk publicly outside of the month of Ramadan. So the people came and complained to Uthman. They said that your cousin whom you've appointed as as the governor, look at what he's doing. He's misleading the people. Uthman refused to punish him. Why? Because he's his cousin. At this moment, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he looked at him, he said, Uthman, are you really going to let this man go? He says, yes, I can't do anything, he's my cousin. He says, if you, the Khalifa, will not, then I will punish him. And Amir al-Mu'mineen grabbed him, he ran after him, he took him and he punished him. Why? Because Amir al-Mu'mineen did not have mujamala, he did not have ta'aruf. Just because this guy is your cousin, I'm going to give him special treatment. If he disobeys the command of Allah publicly, if he is responsible for misleading people and misguiding people, and you do not want to punish him and hold him responsible, I shall hold him responsible. And this was the attitude of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Had they laid back, and said that, let someone else take care of the mess which is going on right now. Had they been honored and respected the way they are today? Do you know what Imam Ali alayhi salam says regarding the truth? He says that the truth has left me with no friends. Why? Because I insist on saying the truth. He says, Imam Ali in his famous hadith, لا تستوحشوا طريق الحق لقلة سالكيه. Do not be afraid and do not abandon the path of truth just because the path of truth has a lack of followers. Just because you don't see many people walking towards the truth, do not be afraid of it. Do not say that this is not the right path. If you have conviction that it is right, walk in this path. And for this he paid a very hefty price. How many people abandoned Amir al-Mu'mineen at his time? When the Prophet says many decades before, Ya Ali, la ya'rifuka illa Allah wa ana. Oh Ali, nobody knows you except for Allah and myself. This is what he is speaking about. That people did not, even among the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, did not understand what he was doing. They did not understand that he was the truth and he was on the path of truth. And many people abandoned him. This was the price that they had to pay. And this is the price that we must also pay if we walk on the path of truth. If we are uncompromising. Being uncompromising, being on the correct path, it comes with its warnings. One warning is that there will be people who will abandon you. If you speak the truth only for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pretty soon you are going to find yourself on a very lonely path. But that should not disencourage you. We as the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam pride ourselves with leaders who are uncompromising, who when it came to the truth were unrelenting. They did not do mujamala, they did not do ta'aruf just because you are the cousin of fulan, or just because you are my own relative, just because you are my son or my cousin or my brother. When Aqil, the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, came to him and he requested an increase in the salary, or according to history, he did not request an increase, rather he requested that his salary be given to him before everybody else. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, no, I am responsible to these people. Aqil was blind. So Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Aqil, give me your hand. He gave him his hand. Amir al-Mu'mineen lit a small flame, a match, and he placed it under his hand. When he was blind, when he felt the heat, he pulled his hand away. He told him, Ya Ali, are you trying to burn me? Are you trying to hurt me? I just made a small request from you. He said, if you cannot handle this petty flame, how do you expect me to handle the flame of Allah on the Day of Judgment when He asks me, why did I favor my own brother over the rest of the citizens? He was his own brother and he was poor. Aqil lived a life of poverty from the day he was a child until the day he died. He could not even take care of his own children. He cannot take care of himself. And his brother was the Khalifa, the king of the empire, if you will. The amount of the vast resources that were at his disposal, he could have made himself rich, he could have made his family members rich, but no. This is not the path of truth. This is not the attitude of the men of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus you find that Amir al-Mu'mineen was abandoned. He says, the truth left me with no friends. It left me with no companions. And when it comes to the case of Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Mushtaba alayhi salam, you find a similar attitude, but the tragedy of the second Imam is even more amplified. Why? Not only was he abandoned by his closest people because he stood for truth, you find that the truth many generations later was manipulated and sugar-coated and used against him. The propaganda which was introduced by Banu Umayyah and Banu al-Abbas in order to destroy the reputation of Al-Imam al-Hasan is unheard of. And I will give you one example to conclude. There is a misconception among historians, and this misconception is believed, unfortunately, even by some followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt. A rumor, again, which was started, that Al-Imam al-Hasan was known in his day as a habitual divorcer. He would marry and divorce, and marry and divorce, and marry and divorce. Now, why did this rumor begin, and what are its origins, and why? Why would someone introduce such a rumor and try to transform it into popular common belief? Although this rumor existed during the time of Banu Umayyah, because obviously of the enmity between Banu Umayyah and Imam Ali and his two sons, this rumor was amplified during the time of Banu al-Abbas. Why? Because Banu Umayyah, they lasted for roughly 83 years. After them came Banu al-Abbas. Banu al-Abbas were the descendants of Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, meaning they had close relationship to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Banu al-Abbas wanted a revolution against Banu Umayyah, and initially they said that once we topple the regime of Banu Umayyah, we are going to install the Imams of Ahlul Bayt as the rightful successors. This was their initial intention. And people would come to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt with these offers of revolution, of revolt, resistance. The Imams would turn them away. Why? Because the Imams knew of their intentions. They knew that as soon as they would take over, what would they do? They would forget about their cousins. They would forget about what they said in the beginning, and they would install themselves as dictators. And this is exactly what happened. And Banu al-Abbas, in their animosity and hatred for Ahlul Bayt, were more ruthless than Banu Umayyah. Yes. So what happened? They decided that they would install the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. When the Imams of Ahlul Bayt refused them, they went to whom? Muhammad ibn Abdullah, al-Nafs al-Zakiyya, one of the grandsons of the second Imam, Al-Imam al-Hasan, who at that time was popular among the people. They said, okay, if the grandsons of Imam Hussein are not going to accept, we'll go to the grandsons of Imam al-Hasan. So they found Muhammad ibn Abdullah, al-Nafs al-Zakiyya. Now what happened? Banu al-Abbas had their revolution. The revolution took place on the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, and they were all wearing black, and they were inside the masjid. People thought that because they were wearing black and they gathered on the day of Ashura, that they were commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. However, they had their own intentions. The revolution was successful. The first Khalifa which came, he was known as Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah, Abu al-Abbas the butcher, the executioner. And he gained this title because as soon as he became the Khalifa, he gathered the remaining members of Banu Umayyah and he executed them one by one. He executed all of them. He only left one who escaped and went to the far corners of the world. Now what was to happen after he secured this Khilafah? He was supposed to hand it over to An-Nafs al-Zakiyya. But no, this isn't the way of the dictators. So after he died, the second Khalifa came, Al-Mansur. And Al-Mansur, he had no excuse. If Abu al-Abbas had taken it in order to secure the benefit of the Muslims, Al-Mansur had no excuse. So what did he do? He began a campaign of targeting Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And how did he do this? By targeting his grandfather, Al-Imam al-Hasan. See, sometimes when you want to attack somebody, you won't necessarily fight against them physically. You'll try to destroy their reputation. This is what happens in politics. This is why every day in politics we hear of the scandal of Governor Fulan and Senator Fulan, correct? Why? Because they'll try to search these things and then eventually they'll destroy this person and they'll end this person's political career. They tried to end the political career of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, al-Nafs al-Zakiyah. So Al-Mansur stood among the people and he said, "O people, this man is not to be trusted. Look at his grandfather. He was a habitual divorcer. And his grandfather, if he cannot control his own desires, wal-'iyadhu billah, God forbid, then how do you trust this man who is his grandson and the apple does not fall far from the tree? How do you expect him to run the affairs of the Muslim Ummah?" So scholars came after and they began creating rumors. They began creating lies. Some of them said that Al-Imam al-Hasan, in his lifetime, had married and divorced 70 wives. Some of them, they say 90 wives. One of them says 250 wives. One of them says 300 wives. And one of them says it was maybe 300 or maybe even more than that. History does not know. Now, assuming that the Imam had nothing to do except marry and divorce, this doesn't make sense. Because those very same people, they say that he began marrying and divorcing in the year 37 after Hijrah, when his father became Khalifa, until he died in the year 51 after Hijrah, 14 years. The very same scholars say that in this time period, the Imam had 3 wives, from the time he moved until the time he died. Meaning what? How many wives could he marry and divorce? Only 1. Because once he marries 1 wife, she becomes his 4th wife. If he divorces her the same day, he cannot go and marry again. Why? Because in the 3 months, the waiting period, the iddah, which comes after the divorce, she is still considered his wife, meaning he cannot go and marry a 4th wife. Okay, so if the 3 months finishes, and the day that the 3 months finishes, the Imam marries another wife and divorces her again, and continues, in 14 years, he could have only married 40 wives, not 70, 90, 250, nor 300. And that is if we assume that the Imam had nothing to do except marry and divorce. And this is not the case. They go on to say that Al-Imam Ali alayhi salam went to the people. Ya Nas, O people, because the rumors, in order to be true, they cannot come from outside, they have to come from inside. He said, "O people, do not marry your daughters to my son Al-Hasan, for he is a habitual divorcer. He's only going to divorce." And then they say a man stood up and he said, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is none of your business who we give our daughters to. We are honored to give our daughters to Al-Hasan. And if he wants, he can marry and divorce all of our daughters." So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says to him, this is all a part of the circus. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to him that Jazakallah khairah, may Allah reward you. And had I had the keys to heaven in my hand, I would grant it to your tribe for your generosity that you have showed to my son. Number 1, why would the Imam condemn his son in public before condemning him in private? That means that he must have condemned his son in private, and his son said, "No, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to continue to marry and divorce." Number 2, most importantly, the numbers don't add up. But why did they do this? In order to attack the personality of Al-Imam al-Hasan. Why? Because they wanted to attack the personality of his descendants. So you see how this works? Al-Imam al-Hasan was a victim of history. He was a victim of those who concealed the truth. And he was a victim of deception. And it is for this reason that many people abandoned him. And according to narrations, there are 2 narrations, one in the beginning of Safar and one in the end of Safar, which marks the commemoration of his martyrdom. And when he was on his deathbed, when the hadith says when his insides were literally burning from the poison which he had been fed, when he began to vomit everything which he had inside, all of the blood and everything which was burning inside of him, Zainab alayhi salam wanted to come and visit her dear brother. And he ordered that this basin which he was vomiting in be taken away so that she does not see the blood in front of her. And when Imam Hussein alayhi salam, imagine, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who was living under the protection and the grace of his older brother, which he loved and he respected so much, who he devoted his entire life to. Anything that his brother said, in his eyes was the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine what kind of state our Imam is in at this time. When he comes to him and he begins to console him at this moment, and Imam al-Hasan sees the tears of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He turns to him, he says, Sayyidi Aba Abdullah, my dear brother Hussein, you are crying for me today, but who is going to cry for you on the day where you have no supporters? And then he tells him something very important. He says to him a statement which has existed from that time until now. He says, La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like the day of Aba Abdullah. As bad as you think we are in a state today, there is no day which is as tragic and as sorrowful as the day which the grandson of Rasulullah and his family will be massacred. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our condolences, to accept our lamentation for Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be on the path of those who follow truth and guidance of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Brothers and sisters, before I end, I have a few quick announcements. Number one is next week, inshallah, we will have the Arba'een commemoration. Of course, tomorrow we have the Salatul Jum'ah, Friday prayers, beginning at 12 p.m. sharp. Next week, we shall also have a regular program on Thursday night, and Friday noon, we have the Salatul Jum'ah again at 12. And then beginning Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we have our Arba'een program. Beginning on Friday, it will begin at 5 p.m. with Salatul Maghrib and Isha. We will have an Arabic lecture, English lecture, and Farsi lecture. And also on Saturday and Sunday, next Saturday and Sunday, we will also have, beginning at 7 p.m. with Salatul Maghrib and Isha, we will have an English lecture and a Farsi lecture. The English lecture will be, if you remember, Dr. Mahmoud Datu, who honored us with his presence a few years ago from the United Kingdom, a very esteemed lecturer. So we encourage all those who are interested to attend these nights, inshallah. May Allah accept all of our deeds, and for the soul of all of those who have passed, especially the soul of dear sister Udra Durban, and those who are in need of our dua, and those who have passed, let us recite a Surah Fatiha, tasbiqah salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.